Rev up your engines! If you were thinking about buying a used cop car, you'll find this video interesting. Normally they don't come with cats though. Now this police Impala is a real hand-me-down. The police had it, then somebody else had it. My customer bought it from them. He actually traded an old car, didn't cost him anything. He traded one of his beat-up cars for the used cop car, and he's been gradually modifying it to make it more fun. As you can see, he has done some modifications, some of which aren't legal, like flames and police sirens, so you gotta be careful when you use those things. You can do it in your own driveway, let's just put it that way. Or he lives out in the country, he can mess around in his 100 acres all he wants. And Nashville even has a police car meet of ex-police cars. If you're interested, you might take a trip there and check them out. There's a whole bunch of these things there. Now you might think, what use is a police car? But let's say you have rowdy friends. Well, you got the cage inside. They're not going to be able to bother anyone that way. The cat will take care of them. Now he's put flashers in. He's got a little laptop, just like the regular police car. Definitely a wiring disaster here. Now this isn't a V8. Under the hood is a 3900 V6. They're pretty strong engines. They're not real racing machines, but in this case it was East Tennessee State University police, so it didn't get any really hard shooting and arresting people much. Probably drunk university students rode in the back. That's got 187,000 miles on it, but of course a lot of that mileage would have been idling mileage because they're just sitting there. That's one thing. If you're going to buy a used cop car, it behooves anyone take the spark plugs out and do a compression test of the engine. Then you'll know, hey, is it all worn out? You buying a piece of junk, or you get something that's still got some life in it? Because these V6 engines are pretty well-built engines. They can last quite some time. This particular engine still doesn't burn oil, so it says something for it. As it stands now, it's running a little on the rough side because the variable valve time and the electronics, you can see, are kind of a rat's nest. But it does make a fun toy. The particular one is just a 4-speed automatic, so it gets about 25 miles a gallon. If it would have had a 6-speed, it would have got a little better gas mileage. But on the other hand, the 6-speeds don't last as long. They wear out faster, so pick your poison on this one, you know? 25 miles a gallon isn't all that bad, really, for driving around it. One thing about buying one of these used cop cars is you can get a lot of parts cheap. He gets a lot of junkyard finds, and if you've ever priced LEDs and stuff, they aren't all that expensive. He could have done a neater job putting it in, but that's part of the charm of this car. And there's a whole bunch of switches, and if you notice, these switches are actually switches from a house. They're just light switches that came out of a house. As he informed me, those switches only cost 60 cents a piece. You might think, is that safe? Well, actually, it's extremely safe, because if you're using a switch that was made for 120 volts and you're only pumping 12 volts through it, believe me, it'll last forever. So if you're planning on messing with your car, maybe upgrade it with better switches. They don't cost all that much more. I mean, in this case, you got less than $1 a piece. I bought fancy ones for motors, drills, presses, and it might cost me $5.50 a piece or something. They're not that expensive, but the stuff you get in the auto parts store, the Chinese crap plastic switches, really, it's a waste of complete money, because eventually they will melt or they will break because they're so cheap and made. So with a little imagination, you can have a lot of fun with one of these things. You don't need to throw a bunch of money into it. You know, I mean, there are guys that go the opposite way. They'll get like Smokey and the Bandit cop cars, and they'll put $30,000-$40,000 into one to make it look exactly the same and all clean. This guy's gone the exact opposite way, and I find it much more interesting myself to see how cheaply you can have fun rather than throw a bunch of money into something that, of course, you're never going to recoup. Very few people want to drive around in Smokey and the Bandit police cars. Plus, they get horrendous gas mileage. And really, as the owner pointed out, he doesn't get pulled over by the police because really, it doesn't really look like a police car now. He's got all this crazy stuff on it, a little to punish and enslave instead of to protect and serve. So it's kind of hard to mistake this for an actual police car. Now he added this police push bumper. He just went to one of these websites that sells police stuff. It was a guy in Texas, and he said, oh, I'd like this. And the guy says, give me $100 and it's yours. So away he goes. Now, It certainly costs more than $100 to make this thing, but there is a lot of stuff lying around that guys will sell, trade, barter. There's all kinds of stuff you can get relatively dirt cheap, and of course, you're going to be real safe with this when it comes to somebody, you know, gives you a little whack. This is pretty solid. And he's even done roadside assistance with this. He will push people out of the way when they're blocking the road. I mean, these push bumpers really do work. And I mean, if you're going to buy a brand new one, it's going to cost a lot of money, but there's all kinds of aftermarket stuff. And of course, he went over the edge with his little flame. Now, it may only be a V6, but with the side pipe coming out, it makes a good sound. Mind you, it's technically illegal to have a straight exhaust pipe, but this is Tennessee. Nobody seems to care much about it here. If it was in New York City, they'd get them for making too much noise. They have a decibel limit, they have all kinds of stuff. But here in Tennessee, they don't, so the people here can have a lot more fun. Now, even with all the modifications he have with the lights and stuff, he said maybe $500 he spent. And since he traded an old junker for this thing, that was only worth a few $100 anyway, so he's having an awful lot of fun with a little bit of money. If you do get one of these, make it look interesting like this. Don't try to copy a police car. You can go to jail for impersonating a police officer. It's a big deal. It's kind of obvious that this isn't a police vehicle. Anybody reads it and gets close enough, they can tell. I mean, really, this thing's got a wing from a Mitsubishi Lancer on the back. Unless you're in a science fiction movie, most police cars don't say riot on the back of them. You can have a lot of fun with one of these things in your driveway or out in the country. Or like he has at the Nashville meets with all the cop cars that meet together. Just don't be running blue lights on public roads, because that is impersonating a police officer. Although if Armageddon comes about, this wouldn't be a bad vehicle to try to make it through the crowds and escape to the country. He's even added some more spotlights on the side. Nice and bright. That one could do with a little polishing. That one's plastic, and that one's glass. And yes, he's been in a few wrecks with it, but you can see, it still drives down the road. He just cut the bad parts off. As I say, they don't have inspection laws here in Tennessee, so... Now, if this was Pennsylvania, you couldn't get it inspected because you have to have all the body parts on. But here, no one really cares. This is based on a normal car. He's gotten parts from Impalas, Grand Prix, you name it. There's a lot of parts that are interchangeable. If he hits something and breaks, he goes to the local junkyard and finds parts and throws it on. There's an awful lot of these vehicles that have same struts, same frame parts, so you can have a lot of fun dirt cheap just by taking a trip to the junkyard if misfortune comes your way and you smash into something. Now you might wonder why the car is called Riot, in this case with a backwards R. That's because it's in memory of his cat Riot, who was eaten by coyotes. Yes, coyotes like eating cats. So if you live in a coyote area, my advice is watch your cat closely. Or perhaps get a mountain lion as a pet instead. Then the coyotes will go in the opposite direction. And an actual police car owned by an actual guy, got it for practically nothing, and is having an awful lot of fun with it. If you're thinking about getting one, hey, maybe you can visit with these guys in Nashville when they have a meet. Everybody's willing to sell stuff here or there, or maybe you want to start from scratch like him and just go get a beat up one and start fooling around with it. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Janoski says, he knows trucks are a Toyota truck brand. I've seen them and hear they're reliable. Can they be better than Navistar, Mercedes, Benz, Isuzu, Mitsubishi, and GMC for small box trucks? Well, here's the thing. Yes, they've been making those Hino trucks for a long time. They're excellent trucks. But you always have to take this into consideration. If you're in the United States, probably not a smart idea. Where are you going to get parts from? If you live in South America, someplace where they sold them for a long time, and there's parts and there's mechanics that know how to work on them, yes, they are great trucks. There's nothing wrong with them. But, it's a big but. You don't buy them in an area where the parts aren't sold, the vehicles aren't sold, nobody knows how to fix them. Because even Toyotas break, and when they break, if nobody can fix it, you can't get parts. You're SOL. If you buy a box truck, you can't get parts for it. That's the problem. And you're getting a box truck, I'm assuming you're doing it for a business, right? And you want something that you can get parts for. That's what you got to research. You live in some other country other than the United States, you can get parts. They're great trucks to get. But don't just think, oh, it's a Toyota, great, I'll buy it. If you can't get parts for it in the United States, don't buy it. Especially a thing like a commercial box truck that you're going to be using every day and putting high mileage on it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.